Hey, what's up, stock compounders? Brad here. So I'm going to put together a new video series here. And this was really inspired by something Mohnish Pabrai said in a recent talk. He was talking about reciprocation tendency, okay? And this is one of 25 tendencies, psychology-based tendencies, that can cause misjudgment, okay? That can mislead us. These 25 tendencies are highlighted in this book, Poor Charlie's Almanack. And what Mohnish Pabrai really figured out is that because of the reciprocation tendency, he could send prospective investors a $50 pen, okay? A $50 pen. And that would plant the seed of this reciprocation. And really the only way for someone that receives this $50 pen to reciprocate is to wire Pabrai, right, the minimum investment amount to be part of Pabrai funds, okay? I don't know if that's $250,000, if it's $1 million, what exactly it is, but clearly they're not on the same page. $50 pen for $1 million investment contribution. So it is a very powerful tendency, this reciprocation tendency. And it's only one of 25 tendencies that Charlie Munger was able to kind of collect through his life. So this series, I want to go one by one through these 25 psychology-based tendencies. Because I think, there's so much power in these to make us better investors, to make us just make better decisions in life in general. So the way this is introduced in the book, I will next simply number and list psychology-based tendencies that, while generally useful, often mislead. And that's the thing we really want to guard ourselves against, is being misled by these tendencies. So I'm just going to share some kind of highlights from this first tendency, reward and punishment superresponse tendency. Okay, so these are in the words of Charlie Munger. I place this tendency first in my discussion because almost everyone thinks he fully recognizes how important incentives and disincentives are in changing cognition and behavior. But this is not often so. For instance, I think I've been in the top 5% of my age cohort almost my entire adult life in understanding the power of incentives, and yet I've always underestimated that power. Never a year passes, but I get some surprise that pushes a little further my appreciation of incentive superpower. Okay? Now, first example of incentive superpower. One of my favorite cases about the power of incentives is the Federal Express case. The integrity of the Federal Express system requires that all packages be shifted rapidly among airplanes in one central airport each night. And the system has no integrity for the customers if the night work shift can't accomplish its assignment fast. And Federal Express had one hell of a time getting the night shift to do the right thing. They tried moral suasion. They tried everything in the world without luck. And finally, somebody got the happy thought that it was foolish to pay the night shift by the hour, when what the employer wanted was not maximized billable hours of employee service, but fault-free, rapid performance of a particular task. Maybe, this person thought, if they paid the employees per shift and let all night shift employees go home when all the planes were loaded, the system would work better. And lo and behold, that solution worked. Okay? Pretty obvious when you put yourself in the perspective of the employee. Obviously, I want to get my full pay, right? If I work faster and get less pay, that's not really a trade-off I want to make. So, obvious in hindsight, but still powerful. Another example, early in the history of Xerox, Joe Wilson, who was then in the government, had a similar experience. He had to go back to Xerox because he couldn't understand why its new machine was selling so poorly in relation to its older and inferior machine. When he got back to Xerox, he found out that the commission arrangement with the salesman gave a large and perverse incentive to push the inferior machine on customers who deserved a better result. Obvious, right? If salespeople are going to make more commission selling one product over another, even if it's an inferior product, they're going to make the decision, in most cases, to do what's best for themselves, right? To maximize their commissions. We should also heed the general lesson implicit in the injunction of Ben Franklin in Poor Richard's Almanack. Of course, Poor Charlie's Almanack is kind of based on that. You can read that on the screen here. If you would persuade, appeal to interest and not to reason. This maxim is a wise guide to a great and simple precaution in life. Never, ever think about something else when you should be thinking about the power of incentives. Okay? So, obviously a very powerful tendency. One of the most important consequences of incentive superpower is what I call incentive-caused bias. A man has an acculturated nature making him a pretty decent fellow. Yet, driven both consciously and subconsciously by incentives, he drifts into immoral behavior in order to get what he wants. A result he facilitates by rationalizing his bad behavior, like the salesman at Xerox who harmed customers in order to maximize their sales commissions. Here's another example of this incentive-caused bias. Here, my early education involved a surgeon who over the years sent bushel baskets full of normal gallbladders down to the pathology lab in the leading hospital in Lincoln, Nebraska, my grandfather's town. And with that permissive quality control for which community hospitals are famous, many years after this surgeon should have been removed from the medical staff, he was. One of the doctors who participated in the removal was a family friend. And I asked him, did this surgeon think, here's a way for me to exercise my talents? This guy was very skilled technically, and make a high living by doing a few maimings and murders every year in the course of routine fraud? And my friend answered, hell no, Charlie. He thought that the gallbladder was the source of all medical evil. And if you really loved your patients, you couldn't get that organ out rapidly enough. Now that's an extreme case, but in lesser strength, the cognitive drift of that surgeon is present in every profession and in every human being, right? We're incentivized, right? It causes this drift in what we should be doing, right? It skews behavior towards what we're incentivized by. Okay, what's the next piece I want to share here? The extreme success of free market capitalism as an economic system owes much to its prevention of many of bad effects from incentive-caused bias. Most capitalist owners in a vast web of free market economic activity are selected for ability by surviving in a brutal competition with other owners and have a strong incentive to prevent all waste in operations within their ownership. After all, they live on the difference between their competitive prices and their overall costs, and their businesses will perish if costs exceed sales. Replace such owners by salaried employees of the state, and you will normally get a substantial reduction in overall efficiency, as each employee who replaces an owner is subject to incentive-caused bias, as he determines what service he will give in exchange for his salary, and how much he will yield to peer pressure from many fellow employees who do not desire his creation of any strong performance model. So here you've got the principal agent problem. It's why a lot of investors prefer owner-operated businesses. Because an owner-operator, their financial success is tied to the long-term success of the business, right? They have an ownership interest in the business. Whereas if you bring in, a salaried manager, well, the incentives change. Often much more short-term oriented to hit those kind of quarterly targets at the expense of doing the best thing for the long term. Another generalized consequence of incentive-caused bias is that man tends to game all human systems, often displaying great ingenuity in wrongly serving himself at the expense of others. Although money is the main driver among rewards, it is not the only reward that works. People also change their behavior and cognition for sex, friendship, companionship, advancement in status, and other non-monetary items. And this is the last snippet here. Granny's rule provides another example of reward superpower, so extreme in its effects that it must be mentioned here. You can successfully manipulate your own behavior with this rule, even if you are using as rewards items that you already possess. Indeed, consultant PhD psychologists often urge business organizations to improve their reward systems by teaching executives to use Granny's rule to govern their own daily behavior. Granny's rule, to be specific, is the requirement that children eat their carrots before they get dessert. And the business version requires that executives force themselves daily to first do their unpleasant and necessary tasks before rewarding themselves by proceeding to their pleasant tasks. This is something I've been meaning to do myself. First thing in the morning, what is it that I don't want to do? Okay. Certainly there are things that I enjoy doing, often researching and whatever. Do the thing you don't want to do, because that's usually the most important thing. And then you can reward yourself by doing the things that are pleasant. Given reward superpower, this practice is wise and sound. Moreover, the rule can also be used in the non-business part of life. The emphasis on daily use of this practice is not accidental. The consultants well know, after the teaching of Skinner, that prompt rewards work best. So those are some snippets. Guys, there's 7.5 pages on this reward and punishment super response tendency. So there's a lot more in here. You guys should definitely get the book if you don't have it. Read through this, and then you can watch this kind of for some of the things that I found most impactful. But this is going to be exciting, guys. This is really going to force me to digest the material in this section of the book, which is one of the most powerful sections of the book, in my opinion. And yeah, hopefully you find value in it. You can follow along. And we can kind of compare notes, compare other examples of these tendencies in action in the comments. So this should be a fun video series. Thanks for watching, guys. I will see you all in the next one. Take care.